This is a great morning. I wanted to make sure that I wore a bright color today because I am excited to be here. Cervical cancer-free America. How good does that sound? Does that sound great? 10 years ago, I was diagnosed with advanced cervical cancer, and over the years, these last 10 years, I've often tried to find the right words to share with people what that actually felt like, and there really isn't enough words in the dictionary to describe it for me. It's changed my life. Those of you who've heard me tell my story before, sometimes I cry, sometimes I laugh, sometimes I just can't get the words out. This 10 years has been a very emotional and spiritual journey for me, so bear with me. When I found out that I was diagnosed with cervical cancer, it was unbelievable. It really was. I had never had a broken limb. The worst thing that had ever happened to me was I had bad acne, which I'm still fighting with. Never anything else. So getting my pap smear, it was one of those things that my mother drilled into me when you became a woman. You know, this is one of these things that women have to do. And when I was graduating from college, my mother told me I was moving from South Carolina and moving up here to the DC metro area. And she said, okay, your insurance is about to expire. You're about to get off my plan. You need to go get another pap smear. And I did, you know, good Southern girl, I do what mommy told me to do. I went and got my pap smear, however uncomfortable it was, because who really likes to do that? No one. But I did it. And I moved to Maryland and started my career in broadcasting, and I loved it. I was having the time of my life as a young woman traveling around this country chasing after the next interview. One day, I decided, okay, this fabulous job I had that doesn't really pay a lot of money, it's time for me to get a job. You know, in your 20s, how many of you actually thought about why you really needed health insurance? You know, I wasn't blessed to be one of those kids out of college that got the perfect job. I got the job out of necessity until the perfect job came. Then when I got the perfect job, it came with health insurance. I clearly remember the lady in human resources asking me, which plan do you want? I was like, oh, whatever is the cheapest plan that doesn't take a whole lot of money out of my paycheck. That's all I cared about as a young woman. Obviously now things are different. So, still didn't go to the doctor. Finally got the job with health insurance. Still didn't go because I didn't need to go. I didn't feel sick, and that's what I thought. Then one day, I got off a plane. I had a boil under my arm, and I had to go to the emergency room. And the doctor there asked me a very simple question. When was your last physical? When was your last pap? And I had to think about it. And I said, oh, about 3 years ago. Still didn't think there was any problem at all. So I needed a doctor. I went to go see this new doctor that the emergency care physician recommended. I went in, I saw this doctor, and she was a very thorough doctor. But for a busy young woman just starting a new job, I didn't have time for a very thorough doctor. So of course, I'm the boss, and I'm telling her, you know, no, I don't have time for this. Just, you know, I'm getting up on this table, do what you need to do. She's like, well, Ms. Felder, we don't have your records. I'd like you to come back in 2 weeks. Oh, I can't come back in 2 weeks. I don't know where I'm traveling, what I'm doing, can't do it. She was the type of doctor, and she said, well, this is how we do it in this practice, and I need you to come back in 2 weeks. Thank God for that doctor. I went back in 2 weeks, and I went in thinking she would tell me whatever. I would leave really quick and leave. She touched me by my knee and she said, now let's talk about your pap test. She said, you have carcinoma in situ. I knew that carcinoma meant cancer, didn't know anything else. She immediately sent me to a specialist. She called right then and there. I drove about 15 minutes away to see this specialist, looked at the nurse's face, and she said, oh, we see this all the time. And this would become my theme throughout my journey with cervical cancer. Oh, we see this all the time. And I'm thinking, as a producer on a nationally known health show, how could you see something like this all the time? And this is something that I've never heard about. But I would find that this is something that happens all the time. So on June 14th, through many doctors and everything else, on June 14th at 7 a.m. in the morning, I had everything removed that I considered that made me a woman. The only thing I had left was my ovaries, but what good would they do me? There was the chemo, there was the radiation. Sure, I had them, but would they ever work again? So after my radical hysterectomy, I endured that, the chemotherapy, the radiation, and then you go home to heal. Heal is a very interesting word because I don't know how well I healed at that time because I was left with my thoughts. The thoughts of, what man will ever want to marry me because I cannot bear a child for him? Now, the 35-year-old Tamika knows differently, but that 20-something-year-old Tamika, that's what she thought, that no one would ever love me, or that people would think that I was a bad person because I had a cancer that was linked to a sexually transmitted disease. Who would think about me? Who would care about me? Here was this stigma. I can't tell people I had cervical cancer. So I chose not to say anything. There were few people who knew, my family, close friends, and a few people at work I told because I was ashamed, I was embarrassed. I remember telling people, do not talk about this. I remember how hurt I was when one of the big bosses at my job said to me, you had cancer in your lady parts, right? You know, we were on an elevator, a crowded elevator with several people. And I remember how hurt I was. And it takes a lot to really hurt me, but I was crushed and devastated by it. Back in 2001, there was no HPV test. There was no vaccine for HPV. There weren't a lot of support groups. My friends and I got online one night to find some support, and we found some different organizations and different people that we could talk to. I hooked up with the Ulman Cancer Fund for Young Adults, and I went to the President's Cancer Panel, and my life changed. It was the first time that I ever thought that I had a voice in a story to share. I remember feeling bad, this was in 2003, that I had never really shared my story. And I thought, why share? No one's talking about cervical cancer among survivors. We're all ashamed. Why should we talk about it? And I remember that feeling the first time I shared my story and how empowered I felt. And I remember feeling that I'm going to share my story until I can no longer share my story again, especially when I think about all the women who are not here that cannot share their stories. This past Sunday, I lost a very dear friend named Alyssa, a young woman in her early 30s, a mother of 2 children, very young children, who battled hard, and she fought as long as she could. But she left this earth. And one of the things that her mother said to me just yesterday, she said, I hope one day you guys really do something about it. And I had the pleasure to share with her what I was doing on Thursday, that I would be sharing my story with many advocates who want a cervical cancer-free America, and that I would share Alyssa's story to remind them how important it is. We can have a cervical cancer-free America, but it takes all of us, each and every one of us in this room. And on behalf of every woman that's ever been touched by cervical cancer, I thank you. On behalf of every woman who's ever been touched by HPV, I applaud you. And in celebration of those women who will never have to go through what those of us who have been touched by it, I applaud you.